A lot of people experience anxiety and to varying degrees, and typically anxiety is about something that actually hasn't happened. And what the person's doing is they're building a cinema in their mind of what might go wrong in the future. The more dramatic the internal representation, the stronger the internal dialogue, the bigger and brighter the movie, then the more intense the feelings. In some cases, the internal state may be strong enough to actually cause a person to freeze, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. Because if you can create an intense negative state, then you can create an intense resourceful state. So what you have to understand is that anxiety is not something that actually happens to you. You are the one who gives the meaning to the event. You are the one who creates the images, the internal dialogues, and the feelings. And that means that you can learn how to move from the back seat into the driver's seat of your mind, so to speak, and you can create internal representations that work for you rather than against you. So what I do as an NLP hypnotherapist is to help you to access and mobilize your internal resources such that you can bring your confident future self into reality today. And as I said, anxiety in most cases is a feeling about a future event. So it's not unusual for people to feel anxious about an event, and when it's all over, they wonder why they got anxious in the first place. So my job is to map out the structure of how you create the anxious feeling. For each person, it will be different. In some cases, it may just be about lack of experience. If this sounds like you, then part of the solution is to chunk the activity into bite-sized steps and stages. Perhaps you're just trying to do too much too soon. If you've never surfed in your life, do you think that you could just jump onto a board, paddle out into a 20-foot wave? You have to learn a bit at a time, and you slowly build up your skill level. Likewise, if you've never been on stage and then you're asked to speak to a group of people, then one would expect that you might feel some degree of anxiety. So when people seek help in gaining confidence to speak to a group, what they're really asking for is how to get into the zone, how to get into a flow state. Now, flow state is defined as an optimal state of consciousness in which you feel at your best and you perform at your best. If the task is too small, then you don't get enough energy going to perform well. On the other hand, if the task is way beyond your capability, then you may go into overload and panic. So the task needs to be a stretch, but not too much of a stretch. And when you set a stretch goal, your intention drives the attention onto the task at hand, such you're compelled to focus in and concentrate. And in doing so, the critical voice disappears, time goes away, and you're plunged into the eternal now, and you perform at your best. Anxiety also tends to happen when there are just too many unknowns. For example, not knowing what is expected of you, not knowing, what you are allowed to do, and having concerns about what might happen and what might go wrong. Concerns that you might forget what to say or not know what to say, or concerns about what others might say and do, or worried about how others might react or judge you. Worried about whether you will be liked or rejected. So the frames of mind that you bring to an event, they play a big part in whether you feel confident or anxious. So what are the frames of mind? The attitudes, values, beliefs, memories, and expectations. For example, one university graduate, he scored top of his class, and so he was in demand as a guest speaker at various functions. And even though he knew his topic inside out, he felt anxious when speaking to a group of undergraduates. Why? Because he wanted admiration from the audience. He was constantly checking to see, if the students were giving him admiration, and not knowing what their blank stares meant. He would freeze, and he'd make an excuse and he'd have to go make a phone call, and then he'd leave the room. So the first step should be to build rapport. That is a sense of trust and liking for each other. And there's an art to build a rapport, but essentially you're sorting for sameness. You're looking for something that you share, whether that be the way that you dress, the way you hold your body, or the concepts and the words that you use. A frame that I find useful to get me into state is curiosity. Curiosity takes the attention off of yourself and puts it out onto the other. And it gets you asking questions that engage the listener. And as you engage members of the audience, they begin to feel acknowledged and validated. And they will relax and warm up to you. You will see it on their faces, the way they move and how they speak back to you. I also find playfulness as a useful frame of mind. It doesn't mean that I act silly, but I put aside seriousness and I'm looking for every opportunity to be friendly. In doing so, you take the attention off of yourself and you put it squarely back onto the audience. So what are the frames of mind that you hold when you talk to a group? Do you remember past negative memories? Do you worry about what might go wrong? Or do you allow yourself to be in the present and just trust your unconscious mind to have you perform at your best? I find that trust in self is a big one. In the context of anxiety in public speaking, typically what happens is a person doesn't trust themselves. If they were with a few friends, they would probably have no problem saying the right thing at the right time, because in that context, they trust their unconscious mind will know what to say and do. Something else to take into consideration is the meaning you bring to the event. So what does the event mean to you? What is the significance of the event? And you have to remember that you are the meaning maker. So meaning's not inherent in an event. For example, two guys plan to go skydiving. One's thrilled at the thought, while the other feels anxious. So the meaning's not inherent in the event. We are the meaning maker, and that means that you can change the meaning such that it works for you. As I said before, part of the solution is attitude, and we can model that from people who demonstrate confidence in speaking before an audience. One attitude that works for a lot of people is the who gives an expletive attitude. So rather than be timid, be demonstrative. Rather than be anxious, act aggressively. Rather than be shy, act shamelessly. See, the audience wants you to be great. The audience wants you to be a star. The audience wants to see you in a flow state. The audience is ready to give you prestige. You just need to do your bit and act it up a bit. Use your voice and play with volume, tonality, tempo, accents, and pauses. For example, let's say it was my first time doing a stand-up comedy routine before a large audience. Now, I've never done it before. Now, one approach is to take the Wimbledon tennis player attitude. So rather than acting shy and nervous, you welcome in the energy. So you take the fear that this guy's going to slam a tennis ball at you and the whole world's watching, and rather than wimping out, you welcome in the energy. Give it to me, come on, hit that ball. Is that the best you can do? So if you have to face an audience, then welcome in the energy. Take the attitude. Come on, give me your criticism. Tell me you hate me. Laugh at me. Is that the best you can do? Come on. Laugh at me. That's better. So how do you learn to build confidence in public speaking? apart from booking a session with me, one way is to look for role models. Look for the best examples you can find and then model them. For example, can you imagine what it must be like to be a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show? Oprah's in her element. She's had plenty of time to relax. She owns the room. She's in control. And then you have the guest. He's waiting in the hallway. There's a guy standing next to him with a clipboard who's going to tell him when he should walk on stage to be in front of an international audience. So most people would find this a little daunting, you know? And you could worry about all sorts of things. You could focus on the beating of your heart, your breathing, you know, the sweat on your hands, or you could do what one guy did. He got really excited. He waited with feelings of anticipation, not trepidation. And on cue, he literally ran out onto the stage, arms wide, laughing loudly. He sits down next to Oprah, leans back with both arms out wide. He scans the audience with a great big smile on his face. He's laughing, looking around. You know, and Oprah also laughed with him. Then as he turned to Oprah, he slowly settled down into a normal conversation. So what this guy did was to express his nervous energy and utilize it. And to do this, he would have needed to have given himself permission to do so. If he believed that it wasn't okay to be demonstrative, then he would have had to suppress the energy in some way. And yet some people behave very differently when waiting to go on camera. I remember seeing a group of Australian politicians standing in front of a camera at a news conference. They looked totally bored, as if to say, you know, what's the problem? We're politicians. So the meaning they gave to the event must have been quite different to the man on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Eddie Izzard. He's an English comedian, and like a lot of stand-up comedians, he makes fun of himself. So rather than waiting for others to criticise you, get in first and say it before they do. Eddie's a transvestite, and he draws attention to it. And a number of popular comedians, they're gay, lesbian, and they work that into their routines. So rather than worrying that you might make a fool of yourself, play around a bit. Be willing to make a fool of yourself. In this way, you gain ownership. Even if you feel embarrassed, at least take ownership of it. It's by embarrassment. So rather than pretend that you don't. Roger Hamilton. It's Roger Hamilton. He's a successful entrepreneur. He created the Wealth Dynamics profiling system. At his events, at 9 a.m. in the morning, he runs up to the stage, coattail flapping in the breeze. He turns to the audience and he shouts, "Good morning!" He puts his hand to his ear, you know, as if the response from the audience is too small. And he shouts it again, "Good morning!" You know, the audience shout back, you know, "Good morning." And then he just powers into the program. So some trainers, they'll tell you that you need to start out slow and slowly engage the audience, and then over time you pick up speed. But Roger just jumps straight in, talks at 1,000,000 miles an hour all day long. So part of confidence in public speaking is giving permission to self just to be who you are. You'll also find the best presenters, they take a risk and they ad-lib and they trust their unconscious mind. For example, Robin Williams was outstanding. His style of comedy is the most difficult, that he has to ad-lib the entire show. So as you can imagine, this could be quite stressful, which he's actually acknowledged. But he's developed a way to deal with the anxiety and get himself into a flow state. And even though performing on stage is at one end of the spectrum and being in the boardroom is at the other, The only real difference is that on stage you get the freedom to move around, while in the boardroom you might be constrained into a chair. Okay, so there's a video you can watch on YouTube. It's called Live at the Met. There's a large audience and Robin Williams runs out on stage, arms wide, shouting, running backwards and forwards, up and down, along and around the stage like a mad dog. He shouts a greeting to the crowd. His mouth's wide open. He makes whooping sounds. He takes big breaths. He brushes his hair back and tells the crowd that he's scared at the size of the auditorium and the size of the crowd. So in doing so, he makes a self-disclosure and he takes the risk to express his energy and emotion as it is for him. He makes big arm gestures and you can see he's sweating. He's honest. His semantic gestures are often really big, but always precise. Every move makes sense. So as soon as he gets on stage, he looks at the cornices. That is, he looks all around the auditorium and he comments on the walls, the ceiling, everything that he can see. So as he gains familiarity with the space, he takes ownership of it. And from the moment that he came on stage, he started connecting with people, with groups of people in different parts of the auditorium, and also with individuals. He even connected with the camera operators and the security officers. He gets a conversation going with individuals from all around the auditorium. Once he gets a laugh, that gives him the positive feedback he needs to feed the creative process. He enunciates his words. He does this by opening his mouth as wide as possible so that he can articulate each syllable. He also uses pauses and periods of silence. He's willing to take a risk, and in doing so, he drives himself into a flow state. A flow state, otherwise known as a zone, it's an optimum state of consciousness in which you perform at your best. At one smaller venue, he jumped down from the stage and walked through the tables and commented on people's hairstyles, their clothing, what the guests were drinking and eating. He brushed a woman's hair, massaged the man's shoulders, borrowed a woman's fur coat and took it back on stage and used it as a prop to make some jokes. He makes an attempt to connect with each and every individual. So whether you're talking to a massive audience or you're in conversation with a bunch of corporate executives in a boardroom, one of your primary skills should be connecting with each and every individual. So if you'd like a free 30-minute introductory coaching session over Skype, then send me an email describing your particular problem and your desired outcome. Make sure that you include your Skype ID and where you live so that we can work out the time zone. I'm based on the Gold Coast of Australia, Eastern Standard Time. And the best way to contact me is from my website, abbyeagle.com, and I look forward to meeting with you.